What's going fuck on? What's going on, everyone? It's Benjamin here, and I am bringing you an interview of legendary composer and producer Sevish. I thought it would be nice if people would have some insight into his workflow, but also his thoughts on music, production, microtonal music, that kind of stuff. I chopped up the original interview a bit just to extract the core, and if you want to know more about Sevish, check out his channels. The links are in the description. I hope you guys enjoy it. Peace. So yeah, man. First off, how you doing, dude?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
I've been at work all day, so sorry if I'm a bit tired or anything.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I'll be all right.
Yeah, man.
How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, just the days are kind of, in a sense, glued together because of the dynamics of the world right now. But I'm actually kind of enjoying myself, man. Just keeping it low key. The fall energy is mellow, so I can just like have a lot of output with music, and the
Yeah.
creativity is flowing. So you know how that goes with ups and downs. At least
hmm
that's actually an interesting question for you. How does it go for you? Do you have do you go into like big ups and big downs, or do you have like an overall steady creative flow?
Ups and downs. So I'll go for a few weeks where I just don't want to make any music at all. I need to get away from creative stuff and just be, just kind of chill out.
Yeah,
And then suddenly I'll get obsessed, and I've got all of these ideas, and I'm listening to a lot of music, and then making a lot of music, and it will be another few weeks of that. And it's kind of switches.
yeah, I see. Okay. And do you, when you have ideas or insights, do you note them down, or do you have like structures in your mind, so to say? Do you keep track of it like that, or
Uh,
don't, or
I
are you more free?
I usually, it depends. If it's a track that I'm already working on, I write everything down, little notes like, oh yeah, this snare drum, maybe turn it down 2 dB, or this section is not working, or whatever it is. I write that down. When I'm away from the studio, I come back to it later on and do that. But
Yeah.
if I'm just really inspired to do something new, it just sticks in my head, because I know that if it's still in my head later on when I finally get round to making the song, that it's probably going to be worth exploring it.
I see. And do you how do you finish tracks? Like when do you go through all the notes, or is there a point where you're like, these ideas are good, but I won't invest time in them, or do you like really try to pinpoint everything?
It's difficult to say. It's like different for each track. I I go through all of the notes. Sometimes I disagree with the notes that I made earlier on, and said actually I don't need to do that. But I just keep going back to what I'm working on again and again and again, and adding little details and changing details. And I did this over a really long period of time.
Yeah,
Like some tracks I will take me over a year,
yeah.
because I just work on and off. So
And do you feel like in general the projects you're working on, do they morph a lot, or are there, or do more of your projects kind of progress in a straight line almost, or do they change all? Are they all over the place before they reach what they are?
again, it can be really different. I think the tracks that I'm really inspired on and work quickly, they're very linear. I start at the beginning and work through them, but most tracks are not like that. Usually, like I just have ideas and I'm playing with things and I'm moving things around, and
Yeah,
I'll come back and I'll get rid of entire sections and replace them with something else. So this is something I want to do in the future. Actually, I want to actually share all of the demo versions of a track so you can hear it change from bit to bit.
yeah.
I mean, it'd probably
Okay.
be boring to listen to that, but it would be good to have that kind of out there, maybe for one track.
Yeah.
We're going to do that soon. I just
Yeah,
it'd
I
be
think that's a sick
interesting.
idea, man. People,
Yeah.
people actually, it seems like people enjoy those kinds of videos, where you break down certain stuff or compare certain stuff. So I think that's a good one, man. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and when you're working on tracks, do you like how do you approach sections? Do you most of the times have a vivid picture of, okay, this is how it's gonna unfold, or are you sometimes stuck at certain sections, or You know, how do you approach that sections, and how do you complete the whole picture?
Sometimes it just kind of happens, and whole sections just form in my head really quickly. I know what the song wants to do. Other times, yeah, I struggle for ages. You know, there are some tracks where I've got a brilliant intro, and then it builds into this thing, and then after that thing, I don't know where it's going. And then sometimes I leave those tracks for months and months and months before I finally figure out what to put next. And maybe those are the tracks that change a lot, that go through vastly different feelings because it was left for a long time. And when you come back to it, it's just something else. Something else happens.
In terms of production, you know, do you have kind of a steady line of how you approach things, or do certain ways of approaching change drastically? Do you feel like you have a constant, or are you constantly looking for new ways to kind of present the audio in a way?
I don't know. Do you mean like the style of the music, trying to keep them consistent between tracks, or something else?
Yeah. That's kind of an aspect of it, for sure. But more so, for example, whiteness, or how compact and the basics are, how they hit. Is that kind of a thing that you've kind of developed to a certain point, or are you still like really experimenting with how you want the audio to kind of hit?
Yeah, I don't really know. I think my approach might be different on each track. Yeah.
Right. And how have you how did you get into production? What set that off?
I mean, I always liked listening to music, and I think the very earliest production-related stuff I did, I think it was one time I was quite young, maybe 11 or 12, and I asked for like a MIDI keyboard for Christmas or for my birthday or something. And I just wanted a MIDI keyboard because I had like a really old PC that I could, I think I had some software on there that I could open up MIDI files. And I used to download MIDI files from the internet and like load them into this software so I could see all of the notes and things.
Oh yeah, okay.
But I wasn't really writing at that point, but just messing around. And that would be the start of it, just messing around with stuff, changing instruments, like changing the harmonica into something else.
What was your first like microtonal moment that you either like got inspired, or that you got that you became aware of microtonality?
Do you know what? I can't really remember the first moment. And when I've been asked this question a few times, and I think maybe I don't remember it very well because I can't remember which order things happened in. So there's a few things. One, I think, is I was in high school and we had a trip to see gamelan in London. But I actually missed the trip. I came into school late that day and I missed the bus, so I didn't get to see the gamelan. But I remember checking it out online and thinking, oh, this music sounds good. And then there's other memories I have of like reading about microtonal music on Wikipedia. Because you know when you're just like doing nothing on the computer and you just like go into Wikipedia and all of these different topics, and microtonal music came up.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to an example. It was some kind of tuned percussion music using quarter tones, and I hated it. I thought it sounded really bad. It was some kind of contemporary music that just sounded terrible. But I did get into it later on. I think maybe through gamelan, and I came back and started looking into microtonal music again, and I found a few bits that I liked. And yeah, so but there's no one moment that I can remember.
How alien has 12 EDO become to you? Is it shifted for you now?
No, it hasn't. Because I listen to a lot of 12 EDO music, but most of the music I listen to is 12 EDO.
How does the music you make compare to the music you listen to? Is it a vastly different field, or are there really a lot of similarities?
It's different. I'm not listening to anything that sounds like what I'm doing. When I want to make music, I'm always making in this very specific thing that I do for whatever reason. I don't know why. I don't question it. I just go along with it.
Yeah.
But what I'm listening to is really different to that. So.
Has there been times where you try to I don't want to use the word, but force like a kind of style or aesthetic into a piece of music? You know, have you tried to conform to what the world is like flowing on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I've tried it, but I can never get it quite the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
just
I see what you mean. Yeah. It's weird, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. I have I've embraced the experimental side of what I do, and I've learned to like really thoroughly love that, even though, it might not. Even though it's a niche,
Mm-hmm.
it's just how where I go. If I don't force anything, that's where I end up. So, yeah. I guess you completely have the same, because even though your music has a completely like unique kind of form, it isn't forced. You just ended up there because you let your mind or soul, whatever, like go to that place.
Yeah.
How do you approach an album? It's a huge topic, but is there what pops up when I ask you that question?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
It does take a lot out of you. I start by thinking of individual tracks, and I do dream a lot about. For example, I'll be releasing another album at some point, but at the beginning of this creative cycle, at the beginning of this album cycle, I was thinking like, I'm gonna imagine like the LP. Each side is 20 minutes long. So why don't I do 20 minutes of like upbeat stuff like drum and bass or something, 20 minutes of groovy mid-tempo kind of things, and then 20 minutes of ambient and chilled stuff. I was like, I'm gonna try and do that, and I was like, create my little folders on my computer with the different style, and as I work on stuff, they filter into those three categories. And it didn't turn out that way at all. Once I started hearing back the stuff that I was working on, it turned out that I didn't want to do that. And then when it came to sequencing the album later on and choosing which track goes in which order, it didn't make sense to have it all the fast stuff and then all the mid-tempo stuff and then all the slow stuff, because everything's just going down. So it didn't make musical sense.
Yeah.
It's like the musical experience isn't just within the track, it's between the tracks, and the whole thing has to tell a story. So I guess the key understanding from that is, even if you have ideas in the beginning of where you want it to go, it goes in a different place. And so I just compromise on that. I compromise on the original idea so that the end result can be better.
I see what you mean, yeah. Do you know how many albums you've put out?
5 or 6? I can't remember.
Yeah, okay. So do you feel like you have gained a stability in how you finish an album? Do you know, can you kind of feel it out quicker? That's kind of what I'm aiming at.
Maybe. Yeah, I didn't have many questions about this. There are some final decisions to be made, but usually when you've invested so much time in working on that album, in the end you know what the right decision is because you feel relief when you decide it.
Yeah.
And then I know I'm going in the right direction. For example, there was one track that I really liked and I wanted to develop it, but it was one of those ones like before I was telling you, it's got a great intro and then it drops into this really cool stuff, and then I don't know how to develop it from there. And I decided, you know what, it's not ready yet. I'm not going to include it on this one because what I already had felt so complete, like a whole thing to me.
Yeah.
That's just an example of a decision that I would make really late in the process. The other stuff like the mastering and that, I've been through that process a few times, so it doesn't take too long to figure out how I want to approach that either.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Do you pay attention to developments in the global scene in terms of, for example, loudness? Do you try to get it to a certain point, or is it more of a comfort thing, like what you wanna do with it, or do you try to up it to certain levels, or how do you address that loudness?
So loudness is really important. One of the first things I do if I'm mastering an album, after sequencing is the first thing I would do, but then I would think about the macro dynamics. Things like, let's say there's a really ambient ending to your track.
Yeah.
I would actually make that louder. I would actually go in there and automate it to get a bit louder at that point.
You mean you automate the final track, the final render, or do you actually go into the project and do all the
No.
Yeah, okay.
No, it's past that. Once everything's bounced down and I've just got the audio there, I'll just adjust the gain. And it's not to make everything level. It's just because when you're mixing,
it's extremely dynamic. Yeah. Right?
It's extremely dynamic, yeah. I mean, I don't want to crush all the dynamics. I think my music's got some dynamics still in it. But you're not actually, when you're mixing, you're not actually thinking about macro dynamics. You're thinking about all this little detail stuff.
Yeah.
But when I get into the master, I think, okay, actually, when everything's going to open up and expand, and there's just this ambient ending for a minute and a half, those instruments that will be there would have been used earlier on, where they've got to mix with everything else. So once everything else drops out, then the remaining thing is a little bit quiet.
That's true.
You can gently nudge it up so that it feels satisfying. And yeah, I'll do that during the mastering process because I'm not thinking of that stuff during the mix.
Don't you feel like how much do you compress the final track? I'm not talking about like mixing, but like the actual, the master. Do you compress? How much? How far do you push it?
Some tracks don't need any, but usually I will do, first of all, my macro dynamics, which I just do manually with automation. Then maybe some upwards compression. In fact, almost always some upwards compression.
Oh, you mean like literally like make stuff pop instead of dip?
Yeah, I don't want to bring things down. I want to take all the in-between bits, and I'll have really fast timing on it, just to fill in the little gaps a little bit. So I don't want to hit those peaks. I don't want to make any of the peaks go quieter. I just want all of the in-between noisy bits to come up. And I spend some time to listen to it and tune it so that it doesn't sound that audible. But I think the overall effect is that it does fill in those little gaps. It just fills out the quiet bits a little more. You can get a little boost to the quiet sections of your track without affecting the dynamics of the louder sections.
Do you use any? Go on. Sorry.
I was going to say then. Sometimes I just leave it there. I'll put a limiter on later on just to catch any peaks. But sometimes I will then do some downwards compression. Sometimes, if I think it needs it, and tiny amount. The timing will be a little bit slower, and it'd be like a maximum of 1 dB or 1.5 dB.
Yeah,
because
okay. Yeah.
You can hear it when you put it on the master track. You can just hear it. So
that's true. Yeah. It's
I don't like to do that.
Yeah. Well, it does really depend on the track, because I work a lot with long sustained stuff. So when I have basics running through it, I have to be so careful with like if I dip the kick and the snare and all that stuff, because sometimes I do want to do it just a tiny bit to make everything even so that I can have a more like controlled feeling. But with the strings you have to watch out, otherwise it's like
yeah.
But yeah, do you when you master, do you feel like you create more brightness? Do you kill a bit of bass, or don't you produce that warm? Don't you mix warm?
No, I don't mix warm. Sometimes the track will naturally just be warm because of the choice of sounds used. But usually I don't mix warm because I include trebly sounds and hi-hats and things like that.
Yeah.
I like the spectrum to sound really wide. I like to have things really trebly and really bassy and really MIDI all at the same time.
Yeah, just a full effect throughout.
Yeah, I like the full effect. And I try not to do any tonal changes in the mastering stage unless it's absolutely needed. Usually I don't need to do any kind of EQing of the master because I've already done that stuff in the mix.
Okay. Yeah.
And it will only be if there is a track that is especially bright or a track that's especially dark, warm, that I will try to either EQ it or do something else to change the tonality. And when I say tonality, I mean like the balance of the low and the high.
Yeah,
which
of
we're
course.
not talking about.
Yeah. Do you use a lot of distortions in your mixes and also in your mastering, like excitement or tape emulators or that kind of stuff? Or do you rather like have more clean productions?
So on this recent one, I've used a tape emulator on a few things. I think on a couple of tracks I used a tape emulator on the drum bus just to get the drums sounding tapey. And I occasionally use some distortion, but only on individual elements, only if they need the distortion. You know, if I want a distorted sound, then I'll use distortion. But generally, I'm not using that in the mix.
I see what you mean.
I don't like to rely on that if I can avoid it. Yeah.
And when you're mixing, do you clean up a lot? So when you work with samples or audio in general, do you go into in-depth processes to clean everything up, or do you kind of rely more on volume management?
No, it's quite clean. I put filters on everything. Yeah, almost everything's got a filter on it. The only thing that doesn't is like the bass. Like a high pass filter. Everything's got a high pass filter except the bass. Yeah, I like things to be really clean. I try and keep my reverbs clean as well. I try to remove little bits of noise. Sometimes I leave things in. Sometimes I use synths that they sometimes have clicking at the beginning of the sound, and sometimes I leave a little bit of that in.
What tuning do you gravitate towards right now?
22.
Still.
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get away from it for my future stuff, but the album that I've been working on has got a lot of 22 on it. A lot of the tracks that were cut are also 22. Yeah, it's just really a comfortable zone for me because I'm familiar with, just really familiar with it, and I like the sound. So why not? You can be really divergent in your use of tunings. Mm-hmm. And you can cover a lot of territory but never go that deep. And I've done that a lot. Just tried so many different tuning systems. A lot of them I use for one track and I never come back to ever again.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But something about 22 keeps me coming back to it.
Yeah, and next to that...
I'm guaranteed a sound. I know I'm going to get that sound when I go to 22. So yeah, that's one of the ones I go back to. But I still like to explore different things, but it's good that I've got this one thing that it's like my 12. It's my traditional tuning. Yeah. It's
Is there a particular region in 22 that you really thoroughly enjoy? Can you point something out that really sparks you?
Yeah, I like that you can have because it's got pretty good approximations of some of the harmonics, like the 7th harmonic and the 11th harmonic. So I like that you can drop those in. So if you have a certain chord that you can just have like this, hey, it's like a harmonic series chord.
Yeah. Okay,
and then you can go back into more traditional sounding stuff and just mix the two.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do similar stuff with 31.
For sure.
Which is another reason why I like 31. And it's just that contrast between, oh, hey, I'm doing some major and minor and diminished stuff over here, but then I can drop this harmonic series chord, and then you can do some other weird.
You recently actually tricked me. I almost never mistake like a temperament for JI, but you had one of those 22 tracks. I was like, is that JI? And it was
really?
22, yeah. But it's as you said, I think you were like going for those kind of harmonic related things in the tuning, you know? Because 22 can actually sound really like gritty and dissonant, you know? So you won't say, oh, that's not JI. But there are places where you're like, whoa, it's shimmery. It's like, you know, yeah. I like that a lot about 22, that it can have like, you know, really pretty consonances, because that is for me really essential in the tuning. Otherwise, I'm just too kind of, bogged out with everything I hear. I need to like arrive at places that are clear, you know? Do you have that too? Or do you have a different kind of feel for dissonance?
Yeah, I never really think about it. It has to sound satisfying. The harmonic progression has to satisfy me, and then I know I'm on the right track. But I don't know what that means in terms of a more analytical description.
Yeah, okay, yeah, of course, yeah. Again, it's really abstract, of course, you know? Because even stuff that is technically really dissonant can have such a pleasing aura or
definitely
glow to it, you know?
Yeah.
Have you what's your take nowadays on 17 EDO?
I still really like it. I find it really easy to compose in. Like, you can have a really intuitive approach. Things kind of find themselves where they need to be. That doesn't really make much sense.
No, it does make sense, I think, you know. It's, you know, it has kind of a, at least my take on it is, it has an intuitive structure to it, just like 12 has, you know. It's not, you're not gonna be stuck too quickly.
It has like a consistency.
Yeah.
To it.
It feels whole, you know.
Yeah, and I like that. It does push it. You know, it sounds different as well, because the thirds mostly.
Yeah.
The thirds sound weird. But when you learn how to use them, they don't sound weird. They sound totally right, just how they're supposed to sound.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, you can do like Arabic flavored stuff with 17 as well.
Yeah, it has
it's nice that you can.
Sorry.
Well, yeah, you can go into that, and then you can go into the other things that 17 does. So there's different possibilities there with it.
Yeah. I kind of view it as like, you know, 12 kind of has two main tonalities, so minor, major, and then this one is kind of split up into three, like main fields. You know, sub minor, neutral, super major. And how neutral sits kind of in that architecture, you can like, how do you say it, visit it and then jump back to almost regular tonality, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like 31 in particular is a huge extension of that experience. So it can really tap into like, you know, sub minor, but then minor, then neutral, then major, then super major. So it's like ripped open, you know? Okay, finally, man, is there anything you want to share with people right now? Is there anything that's coming up, or, you know, what are you going to do in the future?
I mentioned I was going to do an album.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a new album coming out. What else? Not really. Just keep being microtonal, everyone.
Yeah. For sure, man. All right. Yeah, it was fun, and thank you for the opportunity too. So, yeah. Right,
thanks, man.
Catch you all later. Peace.
Divide the octave into 7. Now I'm planning to take over the world with an unreality like Sevish. Tunes from a different era, leave him in the mist, deep as the abyss. When I MC, I disappear from perception. View like an eagle's eye, came straight from the cinema. Grace the earth with symphonies like Nicolas Guerrero. Ceremonies and seminars. When the devils come, we orchestrate from above.